and half of them many times didn't make it past 4 or 5 years old. One thing that if he would do for me, I have sheets up here. I want to make a timeline on the history of St. Marie. Those of you that are here, have any of you gone over to St. Mary of the Woods? We took a bus trip over there, maybe 10 years ago. And when you're going down the long hallway to the grave site of Mother Theodore, they have a timeline of their sisters. And we're on it, by the way, and we'll get to that later. But I want to do the same thing. Starting in 1835, we were here, or we had people over here. I would like for you to fill out information, your family name, the names of the ones that came over here, when they came over here, where they came from. It's all in there. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize this. But before you leave, if you would, take one of these with you. I put it in big print so everybody can read it. I'm at that age right now. But also, what was their port of entry? Did they come through New York? Did they come through New Orleans? Both in this area came from both places. So we want you to do a little bit of research. I want to do this because in 2026 is the 250-year celebration of the United States. In 1976, St. Marie had the bicentennial, and we had a really good time. We're going to do it again in St. Marie, but we need help this time. We need the entire county, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now. I invited myself to the Ministerial Association meeting in May, and we'll talk to all the churches in the county and see if we can get them involved. Come down here and put up a stand. Come down here and run a game. Come down here and make some money for your church. Make it a true celebration. Old-fashioned games, three-legged race, sack race. No climbing the water tower, though, for those of you who know. Those of you in my age, you know what I'm talking about. So that I would like for you to do when you leave. We have one guy here that I want to introduce. I'm going to be out of order. Larry Judge is from Olney. He's very involved in the Olney Historical Society, and he has information on the Bend. Bad news is he has to get back down there because he's got stuff he has to do with the Historical Foundation. So we're going to talk out of order just a little bit. Larry's going to talk, then we'll get back into St. Marie.
Is it on? Yep. Can you hear me? Okay. I hate technology.
Can you hear him?
Yeah.
It's not on.
Yeah,
It is.
It's a little closer.
Move the mic closer.
Is that better? Okay. That's the why I hate technology, and here's the proof right here. A 7-year-old flip phone. Okay, my name is Larry Judge. I am the curator of the Richland Heritage Museum Foundation. I have several ties to this area that go back to the 1970s. Mr. Dave Geltz being the most important one, and he can vouch for that, for better or worse. When Mike first ran this idea by me to do this and have the community share stories and learn more about their history, I thought, why can't we do this in Olney? It wouldn't ever happen. And here's why. This community is so lucky to be so tight-knit and small with 3 establishments tying it together. St. Mary's, this American Legion, and in my mind, Highbenders. So you're very, very fortunate. We've had so many people move into the Olney area from out of town over the last few decades for whatever reason. Jobs. Carl is a huge employer. The bottom line is, and pardon my English, they do not give a rat's behind about Olney history. And that's what we're faced with down there with our Heritage Museum Foundation. I've got some flyers up here on the table. You're welcome to take some with you. So please, at your convenience, come down and see us sometime. So anyhow, I want to read a passage from a book I put out last year. It's called Echoes. And one of the most important people to have been raised in the Bend area was named William Henry Shryock. Okay, let me catch my breath here. Take a breath, take a drink of water. To summarize, through dedication and unique persona, Henry William Shryock, although born into poverty and raised on the edge of the Dark Bend territory of the Amberall River, became a giant in the field of education. One need not look further than Shryock Auditorium, completed in 1918 and still considered to be the heart of the Southern Illinois University campus, for evidence of the status he attained. In keeping with the continuation of Echo's firsthand accounts of early pioneer life in the area, we will hear from Henry himself as he chronicles his youthful experiences, which will be of special interest to those curious as to what the Dark Bend was like 150 years ago, using his mastery of language and recorded in his published memoirs, The Long, Long Road, 230 pages long, fortunately completed just prior to his unfortunate death. Henry was born in 1861, the son of William and Elizabeth Shryock, the middle child of 7. The family lived on the first plat just east of present-day St. Marie Road on the Jasper-Richland County line, a high point overlooking vast areas of open prairie, not yet fenced or even purchased at that time. His father was an ardent abolitionist. After serving for more than 3 years and almost dying of typhoid at a hospital in Nashville for the Union cause, William was mustered out just 2 days before Lincoln's martyrdom. Henry remembers the time without his father's presence as being shabbiness, hunger, and cold. Among his many detailed accounts concerning the Bend during the post-Civil War era, Henry noted that it was claimed the woodlands growth extended for 6 miles in width, that you could travel and walk from the bottoms at Lawrenceville and travel 80 miles northward, where this long streak of forest venture wound its way through the prairie without coming out into the sunlight. So dense and untouched was the forest growth. This was decades before the Corps of Engineers would make drastic changes in the course of the Amberall River to alleviate flooding. At that time, the Shryock Farm and the Amberall were separated by only 3 miles. Some conditions which Shryock describes would have been typical for any rural family of Richland County or Jasper County, including roads being impassable much of the year, church services held only once or twice a month, and large families filling rural schools with children aged 6 to 21. The ominous proximity of the Dark Bend to his family, which owned 40 acres, made life anything but typical. In his 230-page journal, he related more stories of the characters drawn to the natural boundaries of protection provided by the river than can be mentioned within the space of this article. Suffice to say that the Dark Bend had a reputation known to criminals far and wide as being impenetrable by both sunlight and the law. The expression Bender has evidently been passed down from several generations and is still in common use today, identifying one's home or family as being from or still residing within the loosely defined boundaries of said area. The following is one of young Shryock's typical encounters with those attempting to survive off the land. I'm almost halfway done. One of the poorest, most depraved of the Benders was not in a way connected with the outlaws, was a man who had squatted on a tract adjacent to our 40. The squatter was an expert shingle maker, his one real accomplishment. He did not own an animal of any kind unless it was a dog. His little clearing was tilled with spade and hoe and rake. The 3 or 4 acre clearing that he had squatted upon had been made by a predecessor who had also built the one-room log hut. The larger part of the clearing was planted with corn every year. The squatter, his wife and children, usually spaded the entire 3 acres, planted the corn by hand, and cultivated it with a hoe. Sometimes in a prosperous year, he would hire a farmer from the prairie to break or plow the field for him, but the cultivation was all done by hand. The acre yield was usually high because the land was fertile. Sometimes he would get a neighbor to haul a load of his corn to the mill at St. Marie, 8 miles away by a necessary circuitous route. Generally, however, the squatter and his family ground the corn into a coarse meal or grit using a big old-fashioned coffee mill. He spent much of his time hunting and fishing so that the entire family had a reasonable amount of fresh meat. But the corn baked into pones or boiled into samp or Indian pudding or parched without grinding constituted the staple article of diet. The half-wild children ranged the woods for fruits and roots and nuts. At the time of which I am writing, everyone below a certain level of prosperity planted a cotton patch, usually only an acre or such a matter. The cotton was ginned by hand, carded by hand, spun by hand, dyed with the juices of plants found in the forest, and woven into cloth for garments. The Bender had his cotton patch. He usually was able to trade fish for wool, and on the one and only time I saw the family, every member was dressed in homespun of either cotton or wool. So, we continue to the culmination, entitled Tribute to Shryock. The campus of present-day SIU Carbondale celebrated its sesquicentennial in 2019. 150 years of excellence in education was facilitated in no small part by an auditorium built more than a century ago and is still considered to be the centerpiece of the university. In 1915, with President Henry Shryock's guidance, the 49th Illinois General Assembly allocated $135,000 toward the construction of a building on Carbondale campus grounds for the purpose of hosting gatherings, administration, and classrooms which would rival anything in the state outside of Chicago. The facility opened with great fanfare on April 4th, 1918, featuring former U.S. President Howard Taft remarking upon the grandeur of the auditorium, followed by a rousing speech concerning the entry of our country into the Great War. On April 13th, 1935, students had gathered to be greeted by the president at the usual 9:30 morning assembly and were shocked to learn at the age of 72, William Henry Shryock had just died of a heart attack at his desk in the same building. He had devoted 41 years of his life to the greater good of the Institute, and the structure was soon named Shryock Auditorium in his honor. Through extraordinary effort, H.W. Shryock had progressed from herding cattle in the wilds of the Ambrol River's Dark Bend to becoming the most revered president in the history of SIU Carbondale. Thank you. Thanks again. Come see us at our museums, please.
Thank you.
It's amazing the people around here, that what people have done. An education like that, coming from the Bend, close to anyhow. Our ancestors left Europe. You're thinking, why would they leave? Society, nice places, churches, big, huge, beautiful, old churches, to come here in the middle, I mean, literally nowhere. This was barely had even been platted, had been surveyed when they were looking to come over here. Now, let me give you a clue, a little bit of European history. French Revolution, 1789. They had a king who his saying was, "L'État, c'est moi." Any French people out there? The state, it's me. And it was, as far as he was concerned. It was him. Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake. You've heard that one before. The clergy and the nobility were, excuse the pun, they were king. They had everything. That was overthrown in the Reign of Terror, the guillotine, the new society. They invented a new year, 10 months instead of 12. All new names for those 10 months. They started their own calendar. It was no longer 1789. It was whatever they decided. It was a tremendous change. Didn't last long. By 1805, Napoleon took over. He lasted about 10 years. You see a pattern here? Remember Waterloo? When Napoleon came back from Elba, he was defeated at Waterloo. One reason he was defeated was because he was not out in the field directing his army. Anybody know why? Any history buffs in here? Hemorrhoids. He had a severe case of hemorrhoids, and he couldn't stand to sit in the saddle. That's what I've read in more than one place. Anyway, it makes a good story. Okay, Napoleon was overthrown. He ended up being out, and the church had been dismantled in that time. I mean, if you were a Catholic, if you worshipped, it wasn't out in the public. In 1815, the church was brought back a little bit. They had a very conservative, very conservative king took over. The church became the forefront. He started paying the salaries of the bishops and the priests so he could tell them what to do. And the Pope said, "Oh, great! I don't have to pay them now." Pope didn't care. So this didn't last long. Paris, the city of Paris, the biggest city in the country, was 98% Catholic. So there was a little bit of, they liked the idea of the church being back. But by that time, there was inflation. Prices were up. That sound familiar? A more conservative emperor took over. And all this is going on while our ancestors are going, holy cow, there's got to be something better than this. Let me give you a clue what it was like to live in the big city. Some of our ancestors came from Strasbourg, over here you can see about in the middle. Others came from, it's pronounced over there, they call it Haguenau, H-A-U. They don't pronounce the H at the beginning of words in French for the most part. It's not hors it's hors d'oeuvres. That's Haguenau. Those are pretty good sized cities. A lot of our ancestors came from the area in between and around it. There were farmers, but if you live in a city, in Paris, for example, Napoleon built 21 miles of storm sewers, not sanitary sewers, storm sewers, because when the water ran, and when it rained, water ran into the Seine River. I think it still does, very honestly. But they also had the catacombs. And that in itself is a story. They've been burying people in Europe since the 1200s, 1100s, 1000s. They ran out of room to put people. So in order to keep burying people, when during Napoleon's time, they had mass grave exhumations. And they took the bones and they had dug tunnels under Old Paris. And these bones were down there. You can go, right now, you can go on a tour of the catacombs. And you'll walk along one area and there's a bunch of skulls staring at you. A whole wall of stacked skulls staring at you. Another place, there's a whole wall of leg bones. And they give tours. People actually pay money to do that. The old building in Old Paris, you see pictures of Old Paris, you notice there are no really tall buildings. There's a reason. Between the catacombs and the storm sewers, it's difficult to have enough foundation, stable foundation, for any tall buildings. So 5 stories is it. If you see a hotel there that's 15 stories high, you can bet that they've gone down to bedrock to do it. Otherwise, it's like be building literally on catacombs, on honeycombs. It's not going to hold it up. And think about this. There were horses that were the main way to get around. You know what horses do, don't you? They create, I can't vouch for this, but what I read says there were approximately 150,000 horses in Paris at that time. If each horse produces 15 to 30 pounds of horse manure a day, that's 3 million pounds of horse manure a day. A horse, when he pees, they estimate around 40,000 gallons of horse urine per day. So you can imagine what that place smelled like. And if it rained, there actually were people who made money. They would stand on street corners in the major parts of the city, and they would, for a price, they would clear you a space, a walkway across the road. So you wouldn't have to walk through the stuff. You think, oh, it dries up, it's better. No. Oh, and then all that dust just comes rising up and around you. You see why people live to age 40 maybe? All kinds of diseases were rampant. The smell was nasty. They would pile manure in empty lots, 40 to 60 feet high. No indoor plumbing. Outhouses, you can imagine what that was like. No public toilets. People, when they're out, they got to use something. Well, you know, the nice parks and gardens you've seen in Paris, they have a lot of hedgerows, and that's what was used. So you can see being around a big city wasn't really all that big a deal for them. It was more of a pain in the butt than anything else. The Paquet family, who were the money behind settling St. Marie, they lived in Haguenau, Alsace. It's if you look on the map, you see that Strasbourg, the yellow thing. You go north about 6-8 inches. That's Haguenau. The Hartwig family came from between Strasbourg and Haguenau, in a little town called Wiersheim. If you take a pin and put it in Wiersheim, and you drew a 50-mile circle around it, you would catch about 98% of the old families that settled here in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, 60s. There was a pipeline. There's a reason we'll talk about in a little bit here. The Paquets and their family and their friends were extremely conservative Catholics. They belonged to a group that defended the church through writings, and that's dangerous for your health when you go against what the guys in charge are saying. Speeches. There were meetings, secret meetings, some of them held at the house of Joseph Paquet, the father of those that came over here. A group in the family decided they wanted to leave France. Now, they weren't quite sure where they wanted to go yet, but they decided they needed to get out. They wanted a new social order. In other words, a utopia. I mean, literally. That's They wanted some place where they could do what they want to do, worship how they want to, and nobody's going to bother us. That's what they were after. One of the ladies, Mademoiselle Louise Piquet, had been reading James Fenimore Cooper's books. The Last Mohegans, Deerslayer, Pathfinder. If you're a reader, if you had to read them in school. Boring, I know, Ed said. She told her husband and her sons, this frontier in the United States looks like a nice place. Of course, he made it sound pretty good, too. But that's why they looked even to come to the United States. They sent on a scouting trip 2 19-year-old boys. Would you trust your 19-year-old son to leave home and scout things out in another country where he didn't speak the language? I'm not sure. They were a lot more mature than our 19-year-olds, apparently. These guys, it was about a 35-day trip coming across the Atlantic, not on a passenger ship, on a freighter that happened to have a few cabins that they would take people in. They landed at New York. They were traveling with a family friend, a priest, and that priest had a parish in Philadelphia. They went with him to Philadelphia, spent about 9 months learning the language, writing back home, getting instructions, and they took off on their own. 2 guys who spoke English, kind of. They took off from Philadelphia and went north up to northern Ohio. They went along the edge of Lake Erie, all the way over to present-day South Bend, where Notre Dame is. They made it as far as Chicago. This would have been in 1835. Chicago had been a city for 2 years. It was founded in 1833. I've seen the translation of a letter written back by Joseph Piquet to his parents about Chicago. Chicago will never amount to anything. It's too swampy. Well, he was right. It was swampy. Why do you think the Chicago River runs the other direction now? It's supposed to go into Lake Michigan. Well, one, they were polluting Lake Michigan with the people settling there, but it was also a way to drain the swamps down to the Illinois River and Mississippi River. So they literally went to there. They came back toward Indianapolis, traveled down to present-day Vincennes, because Vincennes had a Catholic presence there. And from Vincennes, we think that they followed the national road, Route 40, across the state. They got as far as St. Louis. And St. Louis was a bustling town in those days. But they'd been told, stay away from big cities. So they came back this direction and decided that this area is probably as good as it's going to get. They wanted to have an area that, one, had enough land to establish large estates. And they weren't kidding. They wanted estates. That's the word that was used. They also wanted to be able to enjoy, and I quote, the pleasures of the chase. They wanted a place to hunt. And they also wanted some place where they could practice their religion unmolested. Well, right here there was nothing. So that kind of takes care of a lot of it. But they went back to France, and they chose this place, we think, because it looked like home. The Hartricks, 11 Hartricks and 2 Piquets went on the trip of a lifetime 2 summers ago. We went back to Alsace. We landed down here in Basel and drove up through around Strasbourg up to Wiersheim. And you look out across the fields, early June, corn was about knee-high. Wheat was starting to turn. Charolais cattle out in the pasture. It's home. One big difference, mountains in the background. That flag over there on the south wall, that is the flag that was flying over, that's not that flag, but that's the replica of the flag that was flying over Alsace when our ancestors left that area. And they tell me that upside down V represents the mountains in the area. I I had it upside down for a while. I've got it at home on a flagpole, and I had it upside down for a while. And I think somebody is watching that is laughing right now because Arthur McKay he calls himself a vexologist. You know what that is? He's a flag person. He's a flag. He says he's a flag expert. And Roger, I don't know, because we're on Facebook Live, by the way. That he told me I've got another flag that is the one that they fly now, and he said that's the wrong flag. You can't put that up there. So I found out, and he was right. Unfortunately, he was right. That's the one I fly out. And when you go by out of town, if you look to the right, to the north, there's a blue house. There's always a flagpole, but that flag is flying. That's why. It looked like home. Also, it had timber. It had rolling prairies, had a river. In Weyerschein, well, in Strasbourg too, Strasbourg sits right on the Rhine River. Weyerschein sits on a little river called the Zorn, about the same size as this one. And our family came over as millers, grist millers. The Hartricks, up to 1850, there was a mill run by Hartricks in Weyerschein on the Zorn River. So it looked a lot like home. Also, they're near Vincennes, which means you have Catholic priests to come through, to marry, to baptize, to bury. It's very important. And also to teach. It was the ideal place. It was their utopia, they thought. A couple quick stories about the county. When this county was founded, 1831, I think Jasper County was formed. It used to be part of Crawford County, from the western part of Jasper County all the way to the river was Crawford County. And I think Clark County, where Casey is, went all the way to Chicago, or it went all the way to where nothing was there anymore. Jasper County was formed in 1831. And the people, Newton was there technically in 1835. That's when they were founded. But they didn't even get to name their town. When the state formed Jasper County, they said this county is going to be called Jasper. And because that settlement is in the middle of the area, that's going to be the county seat. There you go. That's a sign of age right there. It just kind of goes, they're going to be the county seat, and their name's going to be Newton. They had no choice. Think about it. In every Midwestern state, there is Jasper and Newton used. Jasper, Indiana, Newton County, Indiana. Newton, Iowa. You know who Newton and Jasper were? Some of you I do knew. They were supposedly, I say supposedly because there's a question, at least one of them was a Revolutionary War hero. Saved a family from the Indians, and sergeants, both of them, Newton and Jasper. One of those two, they can't really for sure say he existed. And I don't remember which one it is. But that's why Newton and Jasper. St. Marie was really ticked when they found that, when later, like in the 1840s, when they found out that Newton was the county seat. Newton was nothing at that time. St. Marie had grist mill and had stuff going on. So there's never been a good feeling between Newton and St. Marie going way back. That's what we're trying to change, by the way. Also, there's back in the early days, Jasper County was referred to as Blue Jasper. You farmers would know about this. A lot of clay out there, isn't there? When clay is wet and the plow turns it over, it's got kind of a blue sheen to it. Blue Jasper. I have one bone to pick with our ancestors. Why didn't they settle about 60 miles north of here, where it's good ground, where they raise 200 bushels of corn a year without even trying, and they stuck us down here? We do all right, but we had to work at it because the farmers have done a lot of hard work to get it there. Also, this river is a strange name. Don't you love it? Somebody who's not from this area, you know what they call it, right? It's the Embarrass River. And there's a story I heard years ago. You know why it's called the Embarrass? Well, because a guide was taking a bunch of people through the area, and he kept having to cross this river. And if you look on the map, it loops a lot. And after a while, they asked him, what's the name of the river? He was embarrassed that he didn't know. That's not true. We have I call her a girl. She's older than I am, but she married a native Parisian. Met him in college, and they're here every other summer usually. And I asked her husband, I said, okay, Ambra, spelled like that. In French, what's that mean? He said, in old French, it means obstruction. And that's still true. I don't know who named it to begin with. It was named that before our ancestors got here. But there are a lot of instructions, and there's a lot of loops in it. We'll get into the bend after a bit. But these two boys went back in 1836 and gave a report to the family and friends in France. And 3 Piquets, a Schifferstein, and a Hoffman family. Basically, they formed a company. They each threw in 50,000 francs apiece. They drew up how they're going to do things, how they're going to vote, who's going to do what. Someplace it's in my file somewhere. I have the agreement. It's like a page and a half agreement, how it's going to be. And the 50,000 francs apiece comes out to around $185,000 in our money today. So these people they had some money, they had some wealth. 4 of the families threw in the 50,000, or actually 25 guaranteed, or up front, and then another 25,000 when needed. Joseph Piquet, the 19-year-old, he didn't have to put any money in. His part was he did all the scouting. So they came over here, and in June of 1837, 25 settlers left Alsace. Now, if you look where Alsace is on that map, it's at the far eastern edge. They had probably a 2 or 3 day trip by land just to get to the coast. The coast, a place called Le Havre, L-E, in capital H-A-R-V-E. They just to get there, then 35 or 40 days on the sea to get there. Then you get to New York, and then you're going to have to get into New York, come to Pittsburgh, come down the Ohio River, come to Evansville area, come up the Wabash River. That's a heck of a trip. There were 22 men, 3 women involved in it. And I'm getting all this because, where's it at? Here it is. This is a 1923 booklet. In 1923, Father Vernick had been a priest for 50 years. He was the priest who was here for 50 years. They have a history of the early history of Jasper County, or of St. Marie, in here, and it's written by people that knew the people that came. You think about it, 1923, they were able to talk to, interview people, so you're getting almost a first-hand account. So what I'm using right here is from that book, and let me find my notes here. They came over here and ended up landing at St. Francisville, which is just north of Mount Carmel. 3 of them went up to Palestine and bought a small farm just in that area and used that as like a place to stay till they got the big money, or the big land bought. So 25 people staying in basically shacks. The three of the people, well, let me give you some of the names. All those who came were related by either by blood or by marriage. No family friends in that first bunch, blood or marriage. There was a Piquet, there was a Lauer, L-A-U-E-R, there was a Hartrick, but not our direct ancestor. This Hartrick was Ferdinand. He never married. He died over here in probably 1850s, I think. Our ancestor was one of the 2 19-year-olds. He went back and he stayed. So he apparently didn't like what he saw. But I'm not going to get into this story, but other names like Guthneck, Guthneck, Bernhardt, Weiss, Weiss, Lemuel, Capps. There were a Mrs. John Weiss was one of the ladies, and two sisters, Miss Frances IRR and her sister Barbara. They had to be related to somebody somewhere along the way. They settled at St. Francisville in September. The three guys went up to Palestine, talked to the land officer because that's where you bought the government land. Then they traveled this direction. They traveled over to Newton, came back through this area, went down to Vincennes, came back up to St. Francisville, and they made a decision. They had stayed in this area for a couple days with a man named Price, whose house would be just to the little bit west of where the mission house, the CC, is right now, according to this book here. They went back down to St. Francisville, held a meeting, decided this is where they want to be. So these three guys went back up to Palestine, and they bought 12,000 acres of land. 12,000. $1.50 an acre. But that's about $400,000 in our money today. Still cheap land by our standards, but still. So my question to Roger, who's kind of the historian of the Piquets, I said, so Roger, do these guys leave with that much gold on them? I can't see the government of France letting people walk out of that country with gold. I mean, there's no way you write a check. There's no way you're going to be able to say, oh, here, take this. So I said, so how'd they do it? Well, he says in his research, they had been planning this for maybe 10 years. They had friends over here in that 10 years prior, many of them priests, and they were checking things out. And he thinks that they set up letters of credit at various banks with wealthy people who would guarantee, if we're buying this land from the government, that letter of credit will be good until they can take whatever transaction they have to take care of with these people. So, there was a story that I read about one guy who left the country, and he had sewed gold coins into his clothes. And he and his wife and 3 kids were coming over. Got into heavy weather. He was washed overboard, and he drowned. So his wife doesn't speak English. She's got 3 kids, no husband, and not a clue what's going to happen. That's tough. These people were a lot tougher than we were, I think. To take formal possession of this area, and the story is, and we've got a painting. Did your mom do that painting? We have a painting in the foundation house of the people coming to take possession. They're on the knoll in the north part of town, where locals where Ronnie Kurtz lived. Okay, there's that hill just straight north of us. They come up off the river. They took possession of the land. They dedicated it to the Blessed Virgin Mary, sang Salve Regina, and fired off a volley. Well, that's the story anyhow. It sounds good. Whether they really did or not, we have no idea. We have a muzzle-loading shotgun at the foundation house that supposedly belonged to Joseph Piquet, that supposedly was used in that volley. Can't prove it. It's of that age. It's a good story. But there's, like they would say on American Pickers, there's no provenance on it. There's no way we can prove it. But again, it makes a good story. It's not a tombstone up there on the hill. It's actually a monument. And the monument is dedicated to the guys that did that. And in that monument, there is it's not a treasure chest, here we go again, time capsule that we open every 25 years. You want to know what's in it? well, two ways you can know. One is come back here in 2037 and we'll open it. Or you look at my notes that are down at the Foundation House because when we did it in 2012, we didn't know what was in there. Nobody had left anything. And we're going, God, I hope something's in there when we open that sucker. We cheated. About 4 of us went up there a week before, pulled the monument, because that monument actually it's not buried. It's sitting on a concrete pedestal about this high, and that stone is hollow, up about yay high. So the stone's just down on the top of it. And we have it sealed with the stuff that they use to seal the burial caskets or the burial vaults. So water doesn't get to it. Well, we had to take a tracker up there and use a pole or use a winch to kind of pull it sideways. And we opened it up to just see what was there. Because I didn't want to be there in front of 200 people. Going, oh, well, thanks for coming. There is good stuff in there. And I actually will, if you want to know, I will tell you. I don't remember right now. I've got it. My daughter knows that it's on my computer at home. It's in my file cabinet at home, and it's in the file cabinet down at the Foundation House. So between all of us, somebody in 2037 can tell them what's in there. I fully intend to be here in 2037, but I'm not working. That I can do this. Anyway, many people who came to this area either came through New York or they came from the port of New Orleans. And in many cases, they went from New Orleans to Kentucky up to here. There's an old story I used to tell when I was teaching the Civil War, that in this area in southern Illinois, if you look at the cannon on the courthouse lawn in the towns, the direction the cannon points tells you the attitude of the majority of the people in the Civil War. Because there were people in Jasper County who fought for the South. There were families that were split because they came from Kentucky in many cases. In Newton, it faces north. That must mean you had more northern sympathizers than Southerners. Which way does Always face?
Kind of northeast.
Kind of northeast. So probably that. Yeah, you're getting pretty south down there. You never know. But I don't. And again, that's always a good story.
Mike, have you read Across 5 Aprils?
I used to teach it. Now, Across 5 Aprils is written by a lady from Jasper County, Irene Hunt. It is based in Jasper County. The 5 Aprils that she talks about are the 5 Aprils of the Civil War. It used to be, if you went to school in Jasper County, do they still teach it?
Yes.
I taught it in junior high. When I went to high school, I taught it in high school. You pretty much had to have it. That's just the way it was. And it gives you an idea of what it was like in Jasper County, 1861, 1865. And the neat part is that I have had some of Irene Hunt's, I had Irene Hunt's nephew in class. I know Irene Hunt's be a great-great-granddaughter, I think. And also, if you've read the book, one of the boys he left the army, went AWOL, and he came back and he hid in the woods, and he hid in a hollow tree. They think they know what that hollow tree was. They finally cut it down maybe 10 years ago, and one of the descendants has made bookcases or something of it from that tree. And if you want to know afterwards, I can tell you who it is, but I can't think of it right now. Anyway, that's a great book. If you want to get a history of Jasper County, 1860s, that's the best way to do it. Okay, all 25 didn't come here in October. They were like 8 guys came and dedicated it to the Blessed Virgin, and they didn't call it Saint Marie to begin with. Originally it was called in French Colonie des Frères, which means colony of brothers, because it was all brothers, all literal brothers, and everybody was in the same family. Then the Germans started moving in, and others not in the family moving in. So they changed the name to St. Marie with an E on the end. There are very few towns in the United States that spell their name Saint with an E. Because again, in French, and I was terrible in French, but the feminine adjectives, quite often in French, end in E. Sault Ste. Marie up in Michigan, St. Genevieve in Missouri are two that I can think of with an E on the end of it. St. Marie was on some of the old maps in the 1880s, 1890s, there's no E on it. But legally, it is STE. Probably these 8 stayed up here. They lived with this guy who had a cabin, Price, and they made, they built cabins. Go ahead. They built cabins, but they were not necessarily good at making cabins. I read one place that said, instead of cutting down a tree and tying it up to a horse and dragging it, they would cut down a tree and then they would carry it. They didn't know any different. So, these guys were very well off. They were business people. They were landowners over there. They were making their utopia, literally. They think that at least 4 trips were made back by Joseph Piquet to bring more people over here. And when he came back over, he would bring things with him. I have seen a painting of the cathedral at Strasbourg that he supposedly brought back with him, and it does date back to that era. He brought with him things to make life like it was back there. But my goodness, would you have the guts to leave everything and come over here? They must have been really, really, really upset or really, really scared to come over here and go through all this just to have something different. Is it about time? Okay.
Great.
My daughter says we need a potty break. Let's go 20 minutes. Okay? About 20 after 3 we'll go again.
What they got downstairs, they have a lot of wells.
I don't think I can get away from that.
She said
Thank you.
I get calls like these once a holiday. Tell them, Roger, they say they're
Mark wasn't part of that. I had a good time with this group. Go straight. Going straight.
Take a right and then it was over there. I've been there.
Well, you guys do Very nice. My sister's like that too. You do that.
That's why a lot of that part of house that's why one well, that's like my some of them spoke like my ancestors. Some of them spoke German, some of them spoke French. Some of them came out in that area, either on both sides. Some spoke German, some of them spoke. That's a good thing. Oh, yeah.
Sweetie home taker. His name was They've got a wood military didn't hear about rough characters in the top 10.
No, not yet, no.
I don't think it will.
I don't think they sit there any longer.
But you need to remember that. What's his
Name diabetic.
I'm sorry. What's your first name?
I'm Bonnie.
Bonnie. Okay. You live up in Arcola or
Who are you?
Edcola.
Oh, you're it. Okay. Yeah. This is my husband, Mark.
I think I saw you at Mike's Numbers. Excuse me.
Yes, yes, no, Jerry.
Yeah, well, Jerry was, Mike had asked Jerry,
Yeah. Or you might say, well, I was Jerry.
you were
Yeah.
Jerry's.
Yeah. I, in fact,
Well, your sister Jane,
she was just here.
well, she lives out of the lake. My youngest son lives just outside west of her.
Oh, really?
And that's why I wanted to see she was here.
Yeah, well,
I didn't think that was you.
that's two people now that thought I was
Well,
Jim. No, that's good, because I'm 7 years older than she is.
so I thought, well, here,
Yeah.
like I said, it's something we got to do.
Yeah,
You
in
got a
college.
sister and I got a sister.
Yeah, I will, I'll tell her that you asked about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Get the shovel. Get him in line.
So you're getting this on Facebook.
It's on my face. You look like your mom.
My daughter has the same face.
Oh, does she? That's not a bad thing. I think I met her. I went to Mike's thing that he had in Newton, and I think I met your yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So you think our pictures
You hear me?
why instead of you see this? There's several markers.
I used to do this as a teacher and didn't work then either.
I could use my PE voice.
I can't whistle. Yeah, I've got a couple things. One, David Rohrer was here. David's still here.
Downstairs.
Okay, David's downstairs having something to drink. But anyway, David is the reason that we have these Platt book copies. I have a 1902 Platt book, the big one. I kind of borrowed it from the high school. I haven't taken it back yet. It was, for those of you who went to Newton High School, in the library, they had the podium with the big old thick dictionary on it nobody ever used. Underneath it, they had that Platt book stuck. And it was getting beaten up. I mean, the kids were messing with it. So at the end of one school year, it went home with me. And nobody has asked for it since. But that's all right. After a while, they can't prosecute me. Besides that, half the faculty are former students of mine anyhow, so what's going to happen? It's kind of neat to look on there and see what was where. And if you look for Route 33 and Route 130, you're not going to find it. Because it wasn't Route 130 and Route 33 were not not poured. Remember what the old folks called it? What was the name for the concrete road? The slab. You go down the slab 5 miles, it was a poured concrete road. 1930, thereabouts, was the time when it was done. And it was done, the land was not bought from the farmers, it was donated by the farmers. So if you're traveling on some of these state routes and for no reason it turns and then goes back again, probably because somebody's favorite tree or their house or their barn was there, and it went around it. That's just what it was. Or if you're going toward Effingham on 33, and you're heading toward Liss, before you get to Liss, look down the road. That road's going to be about a 5-degree angle to the left, because they started pouring at Liss, going both directions, and somebody was off just about 5 degrees. But dumb stuff like that I notice. St. Marie, this road right here in from Route 130, technically the name of it is Route 130A. But the state would love to get rid of it because they don't want to have to fix it and maintain it. Yeah, and the county's not going to take it back. So here's the reason. You ever wonder why we have a state route and nobody else does? Dr. G.C. Brown lived just across, well, in fact, that empty lot right there across the street is where his house was. He was a doctor here in town. He made house calls. He would treat you. He'd treat your animals. He also was a good friend of the governor of Illinois in 1930. And when they were pouring all the concrete roads, he put a bug in the governor's ear, and we got a hard road. My mom was born in 1925, and she told me about roller skating from St. Marie to Beauce and back on the hard road. Think about it, that's a long way on those old steel wheels. How many pair of shoes would you tear up doing that? I learned the hard way you don't wear your good church shoes when you're doing that. Mom gets a little ticked off. The story on this is, and I got this from somebody who was a contemporary of Dr. Brown, the road stopped right at the stop sign there by the old bank building on the east side or west side of the four-way stop. And Doc was over here, and the contractor was finished up, and he was getting all his equipment together. Guys are loading up, and Doc came out and said, "I want this to go all the way across the intersection." And the contractor said, "No, I can't do that. It says right here, I stop right here." Well, about a month later, the contractor was back with his men, with his equipment, and he said, "I don't know who you know, but I'll concrete this whole town if you want me to." Doc said, "No, I just want just across the intersection." Supposedly a true story, but that's why we have All right, now I notice now on the maps it's designated as a county road. Was it County Road 1900 or something like that? Anybody remember? If you look on the map, that's what it is. But technically, it's still a state-maintained road against their will. One other story. In 1839, 1840, Joseph Paquet decided he wanted some nuns to come to St. Marie to teach religion. And he was very adamant about religion being taught. And he talked to the Bishop of Vincennes, a guy named de la Handière. And he said, do you have any way that you can bring some nuns? Can you entice some nuns to come over here? He gave him $10,000 then, which is a boatload of money, to bring these nuns over. Well, the Sisters of Providence, name sound familiar? St. Mary of the Woods. They were brought over. They got as far, in fact, I have a book from St. Mary of the Woods. It talks about Sister Mary Theodore Guerin and 4 nuns coming over. They were on the ship for like 45 or 50 days, and they stopped in Louisville, Kentucky, because the bishop in Louisville was a friend of the nuns. And then they came up, instead of coming up the Wabash, they got on they called it a stagecoach, probably an open wagon, in the spring. And it talked about getting washed away, crossing creeks and that kind of stuff. When they got to Vincennes, the bishop said, well, you really I'm going to send you up north up here, up there near a town named Terre Haute. Well, the reason was the east half of Illinois and all of Indiana was one diocese. But the Catholic Church changed that. They made the Illinois state line the diocese line. Well, if the Bishop of Vincennes sent nuns into Illinois, he no longer controlled them. And bishops are all about control. So he said, you need to go over, I'll send you up there. Have you ever been to their campus? It's in the middle of nowhere. Still is. But there was a family living up there, had a 4-room log cabin, and above the 4 rooms there was like a lean-to underneath the kind of like a really crude attic above the rooms themselves. Those 5 nuns lived up there in the wintertime. She talks about snow coming through the thatch and the roof, and really miserable. And from what I gather, I've seen some of her letters, Sister Theodore was not one to take it lying down. She wrote a letter to the bishop in Vincennes. Why are we here? We're in the middle of nowhere. We've got nothing to do. Why are we here? Well, he wrote her a letter back and he said, oh, you are in, how do he put it? You are in St. Marie of the Woods. In French, it was Saint Marie du Bois. Because she said, we've got a house promised to us. We've got money promised to us in St. Marie. Why can't we go there? Well, you are in St. Marie of the Woods. Can you imagine what this area would be like if St. Marie of the Woods were parked up here at the mission house? You can imagine. It's hard to believe. But because of one bishop, Sister Theodore, and she's a saint now, by the way, she didn't give up. She went down to Vincennes to talk to him. Nuns don't do that normally. She talked to him, and he got really ticked at her and imprisoned her in the basement of the cathedral down there for about a week. Let her out, and he said, you no longer have any power in my diocese. Go. I don't care where you go, just get out of here. Well, she was a very smart lady, because she said, I know you're trying to collect money to build a new cathedral. I know people back in France who can help you. I know people who would donate to your cathedral. And he believed her. Shouldn't have. She went back to France, and she knew people who knew the Pope. Within 2 years, Bishop de la Handière resigned. Bishops don't normally resign. But that's the story of why they're up there. In fact, when you read the history, we've got some history books down at the foundation. We are mentioned. We're a major part of their story because they should have been here. And I still hold a grudge against Bishop DeLonde Hare because just imagine what they would have done for the economy in this area. It's amazing. And by the way, St. Mary of the Woods was an all-girls school. Now they've let boys in, and they play football. I think it's 8-man football, 8-man college football. No women play on the football team, just guys. But I didn't mean to say that. Yes, I did. Just to show that Joseph McKay didn't hold a grudge against the nuns when they were finally up there for good and they were getting ready to build their school, he gave them $10,000 straight to the Sisters of Providence. And with that money, they built their first brick school building. I think it's a 2-story, 30 by 60 or something like that. That was the first building they used because they started taking in students from the Terre Haute area, and they had the convent there. And I mean, those ladies have it going. If you ever go over there, they're a fun bunch of ladies. They are working it really big time. Donna and I and my wife Teresa went over when we did the religious thing, and they let us borrow a habit from the 1880s. I mean, the original, not an original one. And they were going through stuff, and she gave Donna and Teresa boxes in here. Look through these veils and find one that's not holy. I mean, one that doesn't have holes in it. Should I tell them what Teresa called this nun? My wife had a sense of humor you wouldn't believe. Well, you would if you knew her. But she, after we got done with the getting all this stuff, she took us on a tour of the campus. The lady is my age, a walking tour of the campus. And I mean, she was booking. Later, we were eating in Terre Haute without the lady. Teresa said, "Sister Mary, walk your ass off, just about killed me." I'm sorry, sister, if you're listening. But those ladies have worked. Most convents are shrinking in size. I think they're maintaining, and they have pictures of the evolution of their habits. Their original habits came way out like this. What is called the wimple that goes out, comes way out here. And one of the nuns said, "You notice that it keeps getting further and further back. By 1960, it's back about here." She said, "You know why? We couldn't see to drive unless they put it back there." Nuns didn't drive very well, very often, and not very well either for that matter. If you saw a nun coming, you know how they had what they did for driver's ed in the convent? You guys have anybody in it? You read a book. They didn't take them out driving that I know of. I don't know any nuns that were good drivers, very honestly. Sister Ruth Ann would probably say otherwise. Those of you that had sister. Anyway, let's get into the Dark Bend a little bit. This area where you're sitting right now was made a state in 1818. That's when Illinois became a state. It was platted, surveyed by probably 1820. This area was an area that was settled sparsely. Before our ancestors came, there was a man named Price who had a cabin over here. If you know any Catts, C-A-T-T, Willow Hill area, they had an ancestor up in that area before we got here. But for the most part, this is pretty much an area wide open. The Bend was not surveyed until 1839. Two reasons. Well, three. One, it was heavily wooded. Two, it was very swampy. And three, the surveyors wouldn't go in there because there were people living in there who were squatters. That was government land that no one had. They didn't buy it, and they were there because they were on the wrong side of the law. I've read in Jasper County history that the Jasper County sheriff would not go into the Bend. There are stories of if your livestock crosses the river into the Bend, forget it. No reason to go after it because you're not going to get it. There's a story about a lady who was, she would need meat. She would get on a horse, take a rifle, and whatever she saw, she shot. Might be your hog, might be your chickens, but and you really didn't cross her. And I have names. I'll give you some later. That not those guys. Those guys, as soon as it started as soon as it was platted, as soon as it was surveyed, this bunch started moving out. For one thing, there was a group of people from the area that from Ohio, Pennsylvania, that they actually bought the land the right way. Here's some of the names of the early ones. These people were of English origin. They were not German or French. They were English. And some of these names around: Spencer, Fowler, Fowler. I know I've heard Fowler, but not Fowler. Bogard. I've known several Bogards. Hanson, Francis. All these were of English descent that actually bought the land. And when these people came in, it started the non-nice guys, I guess you'd say, started moving out. That and the Germans started moving in from Stringtown area. Even though some of those farms up next to the bend, their barns would mysteriously catch fire, or their crops might be trampled. Eventually, Germans, being hard-headed, as we all know, don't give up, and these miscreants kind of went the other direction. There's a story, and I can't prove it, but this is written in the Piquet history, that in 1839, 1840, in that area, Joseph Piquet and some of the others that were here heard a story about a family over in the Bend, and they didn't call it the Bend then, but the family across the river was destitute. A bunch of little kids, just urchins, living like animals. So they gathered up food and clothing and blankets and took it over there. And it said that they were so mistreated by this group and others that they dropped the stuff off and never went back. There's a story also of two brothers living over there, living literally in caves, and I can't prove this, but they supposedly were cannibalistic. And they apparently were, even thieves and robbers have standards, because these two disappeared from the story that I read. But that was the reputation that the Bend had. In fact, if you look on that St. Marie map, you go across the Jaeger Bridge and you turn right. Instead of going left toward the church toward St. Valentine's, you turn right, and it goes about a mile, and the road makes a curve. It quits following the river, makes a sharp curve back to the east. And the guy who wrote this, or filled out this plat book, not on the land, on the road it says Dark Bend. That's what it was known by, for good and or bad reasons. There are stories that murders were not uncommon. There are stories about bones being found at the bottom of a well when the well is being cleaned out. I know one story for true, and I'll probably get it wrong. Donna and Bonnie have heard the story. Over at the Foundation House, we have a set of brass knuckles that was found at the bottom of a well over in the Bend. And supposedly there was someone who was beaten to death with a pair of brass knuckles. And was he ever caught? Did they ever catch him? Do you remember how the story goes? Anyway, he disposed of the brass knuckles supposedly in that well. And many years later, when they were cleaning out the well, they found it. And we have they're over there someplace. We need to clean up a little bit over there. Things tend to get a little jumbled up sometimes, but the brass knuckles are there. They're real things. The German immigrants started moving in. When was Stringtown started? You guys know when the first Stringtown group came in? Pardon? 1820. I know the Oaks came from Ohio, and the Dolls and the Cokers and several others. But where to go? Oh, the names of these German immigrants that came into the Bend. They actually bought land. It tamed down some. Kraus. But if you look on that plat book, Kraus is spelled with an E on the end of it. Michael Bail, spelled Boehl, which some still do, but others with Bahl. You know why? I don't know. What's the difference? Is it military? The reason I ask because my wife worked as a teacher or as an aide out at the nursing home for Noe Bail, for your grandpa, and she and Noe got along really well. Noe was a little ornery. He liked to tell stories, so I'm not sure if what he told her was really true or not. But what he said was he was in World War I, and when he got ready to collect his World War I pension, he found out that in the records his name was spelled Bahl. And he figured if he wanted his pension, he better spell it that way. But all of you guys spelled that way too. So I don't know.
But my dad went to the Korean War Boehl.
Yeah, that's the German.
Because Grandma said for her, in case something happened to Dad or Korea, for her to get her German pension, it was Boehl. So it's in our abstract. There's a whole bunch of different spellings.
Yeah.
Might have been misspelling one time.
It's hard telling.
I've heard when they did the census, they would come to the individual houses and do it, and some weren't so literate, and they would just spell it as it sounded.
Right. And the same thing happened coming through Ellis Island.
Yeah.
There were.
Faller might be F-A-L-L-E-R now.
That could well be. I know Mueller in German is Miller over here. I'm thinking maybe that got changed during World War I because you didn't want to be associated with the Germans when we're fighting the Germans. That's a possibility. You see our name spelled with a K on the end of it because it sounds like a K, but it's H. And we found out the right way to pronounce our name when we were over in Alsace 2 years ago. No H on the front. It's Artrick. Artrick. The same way with Bonnie's grandpa. Huss. If you're under 40, you probably call it Hoos or call it Huss. But it's the older folks call it Hoos. You take the H off of Huss and you get Oos. And we parked outside of a house over in Alsace that had the name Oos on the name tag on the house. We saw the name Frawley, Schneider, like they spell it down in Stringtown. Bartholomew spelled just a little bit differently. What were some of the others? Keller. A lot of names that are from here are there. You find out that my mom's dad was or granddad was a Bolander. Bolander, you think, well, that's German. Well, Hartrick and Bolander were born in the same town, but not in Germany, in Alsace. It gets really confusing. In fact, while we're on that, Alsace has changed hands at least 4 or 5 times between Germany and France, depending on who won the last war. And when our ancestors came over, the Bolanders and the Hunsingers came over speaking German. The Hartricks came over speaking French. And I know that because we have the first page of the Bible that our great-great-grandfather came with, and births, deaths, marriages. Birth is naissance, death is mort, M-O-R-T-E, so that's French. But also in that area, they spoke something called Alsatian, which is kind of like, think of Cajun English. I guarantee that's going to make your wise water. You know, that kind of Cajun. It's kind of a German, more German than French. And the average person spoke Alsatian. When our ancestors came over, it was about 50-50 German and French, with Alsatian thrown in. I read now it's about 90% French and 10% German, but the Alsatian schools are now teaching the Alsatian language again. They're trying to preserve their history. It's like us teaching Latin, I guess. But it surprised me. We were at a restaurant in Weiersheim, and we were told the restaurant was owned by the 7th generation, which means that our ancestors probably ate at that restaurant. The waitresses, 2 younger girls, were both granddaughters of the owner. They both spoke French, English, not bad. a little bit of German. Their grandfather was the cook. He spoke German only. Didn't speak English, didn't speak French, so the girls had to translate back and forth for us. So it's still that way. You know, you say, well, I know I came from France, so I speak French. Well, maybe, maybe not. We have a melting pot right here. Names of the German immigrants, Bale, Jaeger. On that, what you have in front of you is spelled Y-E-A-G-E-R. Yeah. Sharon has no clue when it changed to Y, right?
I knew I was taught that spelling and I got in trouble for it.
Also, McCall was a name over there. Davis, Kurtz, K-I-R-T-S, Newland, Johnson, Geiger, Beasler. Is Beasler still around? I remember that name as a kid.
Well, it's still the Beasler house and property.
My grandmother was a beast.
Okay. Menacher. Artie Hunsinger's grandma was a Menacher. Goss. And here's one. I got this firsthand. We have a book, or a little book of poetry over at the Foundation House. It was written by a lady from the Bend originally, but she married some guy from Tuscola and lived up there. They never had kids. She was very active in the Tuscola area, and there was after she passed away and her husband was gone, and they had a yard sale, and somebody bought this little, like a notebook, very neatly written poetry in English, because the lady would have been born in the early 1900s. And it came back to us. A guy who happened to be from in this area saw it and bought it, and we have it. And we had advertised that we had it, and there was a guy who stopped by. His great-grandparents were Huber, H-U-B-E-R, which was the name of this lady, but his name was Hoover, H-A-H-O-O-V-E-R. And he said, and here's his story why it changed. His great-grandfather married a divorced woman, and his family disowned him. He moved out of the house, moved over someplace in the South Bend, I think, and changed his name to H-O-O-V-E-R. And his descendants are Hoovers.
He's buried at the Berlin Cemetery.
Pardon?
He's buried at the Berlin Cemetery.
Okay, great. Donna, did you bring those maps of the cemeteries? There's maps up here that have every cemetery in Jasper County and where they are. And if you want to get an idea of the size of them, Glenn Sunderland's mother, Sarah Sunderland, and Glenn finished it up, A History of Jasper County, 1972. It's at the Leighton Newton Library, and we've got a copy down here. She and her lady friends, and most of these ladies were in their 60s and 70s and 80s, they surveyed every cemetery in Jasper County. They didn't write down the names, but they counted graves. If you want to know how many graves were in each of these cemeteries in 1972, it's in that Jasper County history book. And we're talking the family cemeteries. There's a family cemetery out at Sampar. The Bauer family. Mm-hmm. I used to coach cross country, and that was our cemetery run. It's a 3-mile round trip from the dam. The rangers, I assume they still keep the path mowed down and keep the cemetery mowed down. There's an obelisk out there with the Bauer name on it. With was it 3 mother, father, daughter, I think. And then somebody also has put a more modern stone.
It was George Bauer, and he was the one that was killed in his 30s, getting off of a train and carrying money, and that's why they called it Bauer Trestle. There outside of Newton, there used to be a trestle because that's the area he got killed.
Yeah, there's all kinds of history in this county. We need to preserve it. That's the neat part about it. Let me give you more names. Oaks, and they tell me, and a lot of Oakses here, all the Oakses in this county trace their ancestry from the Oakses in Stringtown. Is that right? Kerner, Hahn, Lobemeyer, Bailey, Harris, Rainier, or as my mother-in-law used to say, Rainey. the Rainy Bridge, the Rainy House. I'm young or old enough. I remember when the Bend picnic was held in the Rainy Grove, right across the street from the Rainy House. That grove of trees, that's where the Bend picnic took place.
1910 to 1953.
And I was just a little shaver at that time, but I can remember being out there. It impressed the heck out of me, apparently. You're out in the trees, and there's people everywhere. And, mostly, and here's another thing that I didn't realize. The Bend is divided, or was anyhow divided in two parts. There's the South Bend, then there's the Bend. The Bend is mostly German Catholics. Valentine Krause donated the land and $3,000, I think, to build St. Valentine Church. German Catholics. In the South, and where's the line at, Sharon? Do you know where the line divides?
I always assume it's the Jaeger Bridge Road.
Coming across Jaeger Bridge.
Easy way to say it.
Yep. Those in the South Bend were almost all Protestants. Very, very, what's the word? Conventional, that's not the word I want. Very conservative Protestants. And what I've heard and read is that those Catholics, Saturday night they got a dance going, they're drinking, they're smoking. Then they go to church on Sunday morning. And that didn't go well with the Protestants down in the southern half. The South Bend Cemetery is a good-sized cemetery, right? There used to be a church right there, they tell me.
Well, it would be about a mile.
About a mile away.
About a mile east and about a quarter
Okay.
mile north.
Was there another Protestant church down there too?
Now, that's the one I remember.
Okay,
No,
that's it.
and the other cemetery we sort of claim in Jasper County is Berlin, which is about a mile into Crawford.
So when you say the Bend, you really need to ask which part of the Bend you're from before you start bad-mouthing something. The people in the South Bend were from mostly the Pennsylvania area. Miller or Mueller, Regal, R-E-I-G-L-E, Musgrove, Neely. Anybody know Jaybird Neely? You ever Jaybird Neely? You old folks have. His daughter worked at the meat plant for 40 plus years. Betty Oaks, Betty Neely. I asked Betty one. Betty was a wealth of history in the Bend. And I pumped her every day. I worked out, after I retired, I worked out there a lot. And Betty was still working. And I was pumping her all the time. And Betty was always ready to tell a story. I said, Betty, why, first of all, what's your dad's real name? And I forget what she told me. Lawrence? Okay. I said, why is your dad called Jaybird? He says, well, when he was a little kid, he didn't like to wear clothes. He said one of my aunts came to visit one time, and he was out in the yard just naked as a jaybird, as she said. And that's what stuck, Jaybird Neely. If you're interested in nicknames in the foundation, I've got it up right now. I've got at least 75 names, 75 guys that we knew by their nicknames. And I had, in many cases, pardon? Oh, there's several women on there. In fact, one of them is sitting right here. And I know what Toots Weber, and it's my grandma's fault that she's has her given name. Can I tell them? It's Georgiana is her real name. My grandmother was her godmother. And my grandmother, why did she get to name you?
Oh, I'm not sure, but she liked the name, and it was also Dr. Brown's wife's name, and Dr. Brown's delivered name.
Right, and I think...
And it had to be Georgiana Marie, because every kid in St. Marie had...
Also, I think that her grandfather, Hunsinger, also was George. Her dad's name, or her husband's name was Arthur, and Arthur's dad was George, I believe. But, you know, Toots is what she's known by. And you didn't bring Toots with you, did you?
No, she had to go back.
There's another Toots also. Bonnie's baby younger sister is also Toot. And I don't want to know why she's called that.
mom used to call her Tootie Babe. I don't know what she did.
I was Tutti Frutti at one time.
Names stick. There are people that I never knew what their real name was. And I thought that was their real name. Yeah, you just...
I wanted to send a Christmas card one year when we first got married, and I had to ask what his real name was.
Well, I know why. I got the story why Irena's Coker's nickname was Lightning. I know how I got it. When he was a kid, he worked for Oblinger and Kurtz over at the garage. And they didn't keep any cash boxes over at the garage. So somebody bought gas. They had to go across to the hardware to get the cash. And apparently he went across there, and whoever saw him said, "You move just like lightning." Well, I knew Lightning in his older days, and not like lightning. But my dad has had 5 brothers. There were six boys and a girl in my dad's family. Every one of those kids, including his sister, had a nickname. Every one of them.
I never knew their real names till I got older.
Right.
Snook, Wally,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know their real names.
I asked my mom how come, where'd the name Wally come from? She had no idea. Because his middle name is Edwin, who is a great uncle, actually. Here's something, I had forgotten about this, but when I was teaching history, I used to have the kids do an assignment. I would have them interview people who lived through the Depression. I couldn't do that now because we don't have many people left who lived through the Depression. We had about questions, like 10 or 12 questions we had that they'd ask, and I said, just go with the flow, talk to them. And if you are interviewing someone who is a grandma or a grandpa or great-grandma or grandpa, ask them this question: how did you and grandpa meet? Because if they hadn't met, you wouldn't be here. Do you know the story? Do you know how your dad and mom met even? I asked my mom that, and she said, I don't know, he was just always around. That's all I ever got. But, it's interesting. That's something that you really, really need to know. How did they meet? Why? My Grandpa Hartrick and my Grandma Hartrick was from Paris, Illinois. Grandpa grew up here. How'd they meet? Because in those days, Route 49 was the only way you got to Paris, and that wasn't an easy way to go. It's the only way you got to Chicago, and that wasn't an easy way to go. So that's a good history assignment for you. Ask around. How'd they meet? Some were war brides. We had a few war brides around here. But
A lot of post-war dances.
well, those of you not my age remember the dances at the church picnic. That old church hall was hopping. When they started doing the shot-ash, it was like a bass drum on the floor. We're going when we do the 250-year celebration, we're going to bring back some of the old church picnic games also. We have a cane rack. Larry Hahn built a cane rack for us. I found the original rings. When they tore down the old white church building, they let me go through it. And what I was really looking for was the baseball thing. I'm not going to say what it is. Those of you around afterwards, you can tell. But basically, you're throwing a baseball to knock something down, and you got a prize. If you knock down like 3 out of 5, you got a stick of gum or whatever. Knock down all 5, you got a cigar. No matter how old you were, you got a cigar. There were a lot of guys who got their start smoking out in the parking lot after knocking down 5. And Becky Sheridan told me this story. Becky was a really, really good softball player. Excellent. She said that guys used to buy her 5 baseballs to throw if she would give them the prize. And she won a lot of prizes for him, I know for sure. Larry's going to build me one of those, right, Larry? Not that you're on the spot or anything, but or the old washboard dice. Remember that? They had an old-fashioned washboard at a 45-degree angle. You had 2 big wooden dice, and you had a stopper let it up and it would roll down. And it's kind of like betting roulette. You would evens, odds, or specific numbers, 3 to 1, 5 to 1. If you could put your dime on there, if you were big enough to get your dime on there, they'd play. You could play. And great thing. Or here's a good trivia question for church picnic. Before pork burgers, what did you eat? What kind of sandwiches did they sell at the church picnic? Hamburgers on this big old grill, the forerunner of the Blackstone. I mean, we're talking about yay wide like this, and they had the big old gas underneath it, had the big old 50-gallon butane tank behind it, and they would cranking out hamburgers.
Right along the east wall.
Right along the east wall. The doll stand. We have some dolls down in there right now, the originals. What scares me is if we want to reenact the doll stand, does anybody sew enough to make dolls' clothes anymore? Get the hot glue gun out, and because every family had to do at least one doll. They would send it home from church, and you had to make a doll with clothes, and the girls they were lined up pulling out those tags to see if they could get a doll or not. Or the guys would be down at the helium balloon stand, buy a balloon and suck in the helium and talk funny for a while. That's what we're trying to get back to, the good old days. Some other names down there in the South Bend, Musgrove. Pardon?
Did they change that to Musgraves?
They might have. I know some Musgroves in Olney.
Yeah, there's some down there too, but most of them over there are Musgraves now.
That's true. That's a good possibility. An A or an O, what's the big deal? A lot of the barns over there were built from rough sawn lumber. A lot of oak, a lot of hickory over there. And the idea was farmers believed that good ground was only where the trees grew. If you went out on the prairie, it's not very good. That's why these guys would go out there and they will call it girdle the trees, cut the bark around all the way around, then let them die, and then cut them down and dig out the stumps. That's why, because if it grew trees, it must be good. Well, they would farm it for so long without fertilizing it, it would peter out, and then they'd start all over again someplace else. So that's what happened over there, I'm guessing. St. Marie always had a large number of taverns, right? Those of us my age remember at least 3 taverns minimum in town, plus the Legion. But I also remember Blue Laws. You know what those are? Can't be open on Sunday. Taverns were shut down on Sunday, but the Legion wasn't. If you wanted a beer, you just went to the Legion on Sunday. Times have changed just a little.
There's a rumor there was a slot machine down there.
Yeah, if you knew the guy behind the bar, he would open the door for you.
Yeah, that's secret.
I used to come here and come with my dad, and that's where I learned to put my peanuts in my Pepsi. They also, over here on the table, Sharon has a picture of the Krause Distillery. Not distillery, like hard liquor distillery, on a bluff on the eastern bank of the Ambro. And the story is that it burned not long after it opened, like a couple months after it opened. So they don't know why for sure. Maybe it was the taverns in town didn't like it. But in 1914, St. Marie passed an ordinance to close all the saloons. I can't imagine that, really. The women must have been really powerful. But in 1914, they closed down, and they called them saloons back then. There was more than 3 in the picture, from the pictures I've seen. So always someone to take advantage of the situation. Over in the Bend, Wolfgang Geiger built what he called a cold storage building. The front half was an ice house. The back half wasn't. And it says within a few months, the taverns in St. Marie reopened. There are also several one-room schools in the Bend. In Jasper County, there were 126 grade schools at one time. I know that for two reasons. One, if you go to the high school and stand in the circle drive, you look up at the very top above where the office is. The very top of it, it says Newton Community High School District number 127. That building, the original part of the building was built in 1921, and it held 400 plus kids when my mom, some of your moms in the 1940s went to school there. You know how many kids are at the high school right now? 400. How many were there when some of you guys and the baby boomers went through? 800. I think 925 was at its highest. It was at the point that at one time, every room in school had somebody in it every hour. There were some teachers who didn't have a room of their own. They would move from room to room depending on who had a preparation period. Every classroom.
They had 900 and some, do you know?
When?
What year it was?
It was probably late 60s.
I heard the class of 64 and the class of 70 were the largest to graduate from MCHS.
What year?
64 and 70.
I believe it. Our class, I think, started out, I graduated in 65, and I think we started out with 225 and graduated about 200. Now, you talk about Anita knows the same thing, and Sandra. We went from a class of 15 here in St. Marie to a class of 225 at the high school. You talk about lost little souls.
I had 6.
Pardon?
I had 6 in my grade.
What?
I had 4 when the lid.
Yeah. I think when Mike Weber went in 1965, Mike had 1. He was it at Wendell Inn. When I started teaching in 1969, which isn't that long ago, by the way, because when I say a little while ago, I can mean 2 years or 25 years. Doesn't make much difference. But when I started teaching in 1969, Bogota had a grade school yet. Rose Hill had a grade school. West Liberty had a grade school. And Yale, Rose Hill, Hidalgo. I think they were Muddy. I think they were 13 schools in operation then. You know, Grove. Times have changed. Numbers are down.
But what year was it that they consolidated? But they didn't really consolidate.
They're saving money, and
They voted to consolidate, but all of the schools were still supposed to be open.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And they were in.
I know, because that was.
Well, they started closing down the Bogota. I think was one of the first ones to go.
And then Rose Hill.
And Rose Hill. I do know for sure that St. Marie, this is the last year for St. Marie building as a unit building.
It is?
It is. And I won't go into all of what's going on, ask me afterwards, but I do know that for sure. Times are changing. In 1900, Jasper County had 20,000 people in it. Now we are 9,000 or under. Think about it. Big farm families aren't anymore. What keeps our kids here? It's hard. It's difficult. But would I want to live in a big city? Not a chance. I'm sorry. I like being out here in the middle of nowhere. I don't mind visiting. Just don't make me stay too long.
Have you said anything about the high school they had here in St. Marie?
Okay, high school in St. Marie. Chris Oblinger, Miss A, as she was known. She taught high school in St. Marie. Well, she taught her first job actually was teaching at the Oaks one-room school. If you go out of town past the S curve out here and turn, for those of you my age, to Frankie Zuber's old place, turn back that way a mile, that's the Oaks School. And they told me that she would walk most days.
From St. Marie.
And Miss A was 5'0". If the weather were bad, she might talk her brother John into taking her. But that was her first job. Then she taught here at St. Marie. She was the only high school teacher at St. Marie, freshman and sophomore only. And she was a taskmaster. My dad told me a story. Dad, after his sophomore year, didn't go on because he worked on the farm afterwards. And if you wanted to go to finish high school, you had to go into Newton, which means you had to either ride a bus, which cost $25 a week, which was a lot of money, or if you had relatives in Newton, you'd live with them. A lot of kids did that.
Did they have a high school at Willow Hill that some of those kids after they went here went there?
High school at Willow Hill was a 3-year school.
Oh, 3 years.
Yeah. There were a lot of high schools. Miss A always had a yearly class play, and everybody was in it, and I know that because my dad was in it, and there's no way he'd do that on purpose. And I know he was in it because before they tore down the old white building over here, it had the stage on the end. Around the outside of the stage, the kids that were in the shows wrote their names, autographed them. I tried to save them. I mean, it was on that old soft plasterboard stuff. I have 2 different people who have taken pictures, and hopefully we will get those pictures eventually. But they're there. You had to know women's maiden names to know, like Florence Cunningham was on there. You know who Florence Cunningham was, don't you? Florence Coker. Lightning's wife. If you didn't know maiden names, you were really in trouble on those. But she ran a tight ship, from what they tell me. There's one story my dad told me. There was a kid in class. He was a big kid, and he sat on these long benches and had the one thing in front of you. He was sitting on the end, and it was fall of the year, and he had a bunch of hickory nuts. And that bench kind of went up and down a little bit. He put the hickory nut underneath there and crunch it. Miss A told him to quit it. So he did it one more time. Dad said she kicked him out. And he never came back. And he was a kid about my size. I knew him as an adult, and he was a big guy. But apparently it didn't bother Miss A bit. Let's see if I've forgotten anything.
You were going to talk about Fox Township.
Okay, Fox Township, that's a good story too. Any of you guys live in Fox Township? Okay, there's a reason why Fox is called Fox, or why Fox is there. Originally, Fox Township was all St. Marie Township, all the way out past Route 130 now. But around 1880, the farmers in Fox, if you look at Fox, the biggest town in Fox is Beauce. And that was a store and a couple houses probably. But they got upset with the people in St. Marie. The quote is, those uppity people in St. Marie are trying to run everything. So they petitioned the county board to form a different township. And originally they proposed the name Union Township. I think from what I've read, it took about 10 years to get it done, but in 1880 they were granted a separate township, and because Fox Creek runs the entire length of it, it's called Fox. It's a neat place out there. There's a lot of farmland, a lot of stories, but it exists only because people got mad at each other. Anything else that I haven't covered? What I would like to do eventually, and we're only in history in St. Marie, we're only up to like 1840, 1850. There's a lot of stories from 1850 on. Someplace I have a map. I made a map of St. Marie in early 1900 and had every business marked in 1900. And also Janet Faltermeyer and Monty and Sue and I and probably 10 other people. We have undertaken, it's Janet's idea. She's done majority of the work. If you grew up in St. Marie between 1950 and 1970, there is a map in existence right now, and we'll have it this summer out on display, where every house who lived there between 1950 and 1970. And it caused a few arguments, right?
People have different memories.
At least between Janet and I. We had at it a couple times. Because I never got in that part of town. I have no clue who lived in that house. Now, ask me over here, no problem. But it's, again, it's history that needs to be saved. Michelle grew up down here, and she has no idea who I'm talking about. Or if I say, go to Haynes Corner and turn east. Some of you laugh and some of you are going, huh? Well, first of all, there's nothing in Haynes Corner anymore. There used to be a barn at one time. There used to be a house in a barn, and a guy named Haynes lived there. That's why it's Haynes Corner. If you go, you can give it directions. You go down here to the corner where that house used to be, and that's the way. This drives people crazy. Drives city people crazy. My niece was dating a guy from Chicago, and she was using our house as home base. And he came down one weekend evening after dark, and she had given him directions on how to get from Eastern Illinois University to our house in Newton. Well, about 7 o'clock, and he's late, her phone rings. I'm lost. Where are you? Well, I don't know. I turned off where you told me, but there's no signs telling me where to go. Well, I'll come get you. You know, that, and he, true Chicagoite. And he's probably listening. But that's okay. It's a different world down here. It's not a bad world. It's a nice place to be, a nice place to grow up.
Do you want us to send this to you or what?
Yes, these things right here, either send it to me or email it. Would be if you have able to scan it, or just take a picture of it and email it to me. If you would, the picture or your history, family history, I would really like to have as many as possible. And if you have pictures of that age group, I would love to borrow the picture and scan it, because what I want to do in the foundation house and the front room, we've got a cork board all the way around. I want to put a timeline. 1835, 2 kids came over here scouting, and then every year somebody showed up, name and where they came from, as much information as we can put on it, and make it a true history. Because if you don't use it, you lose it. That's just fact of life. Yes.
Hey, Mike, did you ever talk to Gina Molinax Fox? Does she, in her home, she has a huge painting of St. Marie, and I'm not sure if my Aunt Helen Graham painted that or not. It's like 4 foot by 3 foot, and it's in her dining room, her living room.
It's a picture. It is a painting made from a aerial photograph. Somebody flew over St. Marie.
It has the houses, and there's a lot of things that aren't even there.
Right. And one thing, I've seen that. Gina showed it to me.
It's really cool.
One thing that is unusual, the water tower down here was put up in like 1953 or 54. And in that picture, that water tower is painted black.
Yeah.
And that's accurate. You want to guess why?
Heat it up.
Because men's baseball team played down here regularly. And you can't see a white baseball coming out of a silver water tower. It was black. I mean, adamant. I can remember as a kid watching men's teams play down here. There used to be a team out of East St. Louis come over here and play our men's team in a doubleheader. Every area, not just towns, every area in Jasper County and other areas had a men's baseball team. And it was competitive. My uncle, who was born probably about 1915, he says, I can remember fighting my way out of Hidalgo more than once. And I believe him.
Exactly where that ball diamond is.
There used to be a ball diamond behind Zook's Nook also. You know, the buildings there, I remember playing out there. There used to be a ball diamond behind the Midway Tavern north of Effingham. I know that because those guys let me play with them one year. I don't know why. I was like a 16-year-old kid, and the rest of them were, Jim Swartz, maybe 10 or 15 years older than me, was on that team. After the game, they went into the tavern. They brought me a Pepsi out. I could sit outside and drink a Pepsi, and that was it. That's back if you weren't 21, they wouldn't even let you in the tavern. But I had a good time playing ball anyhow. Yeah. Yeah, Gina Fox has this. Here's, right here, it's hard to see at a distance, but right here is the water tower. If you want to take a look at it before you leave. The painting is a large, large painting. And we might be able to talk Gina out of that for next year too. I don't know. That's kind of hard.
Mr. Harker.
Yes.
I hope it's okay to mention, but I don't know if many of you knew that on the edge of the Richland County line, there was several Swiss settlers, the Earpers, the Schilts, the Venomans, and my grandfather was born in Jasper County in 1900, but was associated with that bunch. But also my grandmother had family up in Island Grove, the Lamberts, and I don't know if you knew the story of the Lamberts and the Lamberts, because Watson Lambert was a Lambert. He took his sons, they came from Kentucky, he took his sons to the judge and said, Your Honor, I want to fly away from the Lamberts who were doing whiskey and had slaves. That's how the Lamberts come, and I've got documentation.
I don't doubt that. Well, the name, my grandma's, or my grandpa Hunsinger, it means someone from the city of Hunzig, which is in Sweden or in Switzerland. When you're right here in Basel, right down the corner, if you land at the airport, you walk out that door, you're in Switzerland. You walk out that door, you're in France. And if you go up the road about 2 miles, you're in Germany. It's all right there. So, if you go back far enough, I bet you almost everybody can find something Swiss, something German, something French. In Strasbourg right now, I don't think I mentioned this to the whole group, or in Alsace right now, you hear both French and German. I don't know whether they get along or not. It's 90% French, 10% German, but and they're working very hard to maintain their identity also. But some of you, any of you guys remember Francis Kaufman? Francis called me 2 days ago. We talked about an hour. He and his wife went over to that area. Francis's mom was a Fambarker. And there was a Fambarker reunion in Germany right about there, just that close. That's where the Fambarkers came from. And that group over there had put out a notice worldwide. Any Fambarkers that want to come to reunion, he said 52 from the United States, not just local ones here, but 52 Fambarkers showed up over there for a reunion. Then he said, they asked him, he said, well, where did the Kaufmans come from? He told them the name. Well, the Kaufmans came from right about there, right on the edge of wine country. So he said, we went over there, met cousins, basically had another family reunion, got shown around, and he said, it's great. And the Hans came from right about there, just north of Agano. If you get into your ancestry, you just look back to whoever came over from there. If you Google it, if you go to Google Map and just type in the name of the town that they came from, it will pull you right there.
Mike, I have something that some people may not know about. When I wrote my mother's memoir, of course, she came into this world as Helen Keller. And I always had a time with filling out applications, and they would say, what's your mother's maiden name? And I put down Helen Keller. Well, I found out that there was another Helen Keller, the blind, deaf Helen Keller, who was quite an established person through her life, quite an advocate for disadvantaged people. So as I wrote this book and did a lot of ancestry, I was searching all the time to see if there was a connection between the blind Helen Keller, the famous blind Helen Keller, and this little St. Marie Helen Keller. Of course, there was about 20 years difference in their ages. And blind Helen Keller came from a place in Switzerland that all the Kellers kind of came from the same area of Europe. So I could never find a connection genetically between mother, Helen Keller, and the blind Helen Adams Keller. I got a notice from Family Ancestry one time, that's the Mormon site that does ancestry, and they said, would you like to know if you're related to anybody famous? And I looked through the movie stars and then everybody, you know, they had them different categories, and Helen Adams Keller was no place until I looked under Trailblazers. And there I found out that I'm fifth cousin, ninth removed to the blind Helen Keller, but not through this Helen Keller from St. Marie, but through Charlie Graham, who is a product of the Bend, the Grahams that lived in the Bend. If you follow his ancestry, it goes up. And Daddy lived his whole life and didn't know that he was related to the blind Helen Keller, and then he marries a Helen Keller.
They call that.
She didn't know it. And so I'm trying, have you seen on PBS that guy that has the ancestry? I'm trying to get this to him and have him help me find the genetic link. I think that would be really cool.
They call that 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
This is in Jasper County. If you start dating somebody from the county, you best do a genealogical search first, just in case. You know, third cousins are okay. Second cousins, if you go back far enough, my great grandmother was a Han.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. If you go back far enough, you're going to be related to everybody in the county one way or the other. That's just, around here, that's the way it is. I don't think I have any roars, though, Dave.
You know what I would love to see? I would love to see a hand of the people that I'm related to in this room that I don't even know. How many Kellers are here?
Hey, anything else that you guys want to know that I haven't covered? Hey, thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate it. I've had a great time. I got to do a little research first. Be sure you pick up one of these ancestry things up here if you would, please.